I'm always better on the first like go. If I have to repeat something, I sound ridiculous.
I don't like that sort of communication style at all. Like I love just like flows of consciousness for the most part. So you were telling us off air, you have an interesting background with how you have landed where you've landed. Obviously, for the audience, this is our new legal team. Actually, isn't that sick? We're super happy about it. Obviously, Sammy put us in contact, so thank you to her. But what stood out to me, I've gotten the privilege to talk to a couple lawyers recently, and they're great at talking. They're great at talking. Very few actually understood the scope of what we do in podcasting, in like our kind of management company that we were kind of running. And I thought that was super interesting because it's very geared towards entertainment, IP, and stuff like that. So, but it's not a usual path there. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and also just to address the point you just said, I think it's super relevant because I have a lot of like young like law students and whatever that I mentor that like come to me and they're always like, oh, well, like, what should I do to set myself apart or whatever? I'm like, go be and actually become friends and immerse yourself in the industries that you want to service. I think young like lawyers or even businessmen, whatever, are so keen on networking with like other lawyers or like that they don't actually know the industries they want to get into. So like, oh, you love maritime law? Like go be around boats. Like go understand that, right? I love the creative industries. The majority of my friends are in the creative industries and like, I love to like go to their photo shoots or go to the studio or really ask them real genuine questions about like what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so, or participate in a podcast or whatever the case is, but immerse yourself in the situations that you want to advise on or that you want to be involved in, because if not, you're speaking from a book and real life doesn't come from a book, you know? And so there's no way for you to know like about the lighting of certain situations and the liability of if something falls on someone if you've never seen it in real life, you know? So all that to say that I appreciate that as being something that, you know, even made us stand out 10 years after, you know, being in this industry. But it's something that I tell younger kids all the time, like, go do the things that interest you and then the money will come. But like actually be in it, like care, have an interest. And like, yes, networking with other people in your same industry is important. And like I have a referral network of attorneys that I love, but my clientele base comes from people that I admire, that I'm fans of, that I love, that I'm excited about, right? That I have a genuine interest and I've gone to see what they do and immerse myself and ask questions and really become interested.
That is, I'd be interested to know, because you deal with a lot of lawyers. Do you feel like because in order to be a lawyer in most cases, it takes such a dedication, such a focus that they come out of law school with a, let's say, not a super robust personality?
Like a lack of social skills.
Yeah, like a lack.
Are you calling us dead inside?
So it's the same thing though with like surgeons, right? Like for lawyers, like if you're in school for 12 years just focused on law, it's hard, I'm sure, at least. Again, my base knowledge of lawyers is the show suits. So take it for what it is. Take it for what it is. Take it for what it is.
Got your spot on.
But like if you're so focused on like perfecting your craft, like learning the law, like you by nature, like you essentially start to lack social skills because you're so deep in the book, right? I think that's what you're kind of getting at.
Yeah, do you see that?
I think you could say that about most industries. I think lawyers, it's funny, when I went to Northwestern for undergrad and I was a communications and psychology major, and one of my core requirement classes was public speaking. For a communications major, that's a dream, right? It was like easy A. Yeah. However, they made the engineering majors also take public speaking.
Wow.
Because exactly what you're saying was so true, and the school recognized, they're like, you all are brilliant engineers. I mean, people changing the actual world, but they couldn't communicate an idea because they were so shy and so introverted and so, you know, and so Northwestern had, you know, the foresight to say, okay, let's teach these people social skills. Wow. And it was so funny because in the class, there was such a divide. The teacher would ask a question and all the communications majors would be like, oh, we got this. And the other kids would literally be like, how far away can we hide from this situation? But listen, I think it's one of my advantages, right? In that I never lost who I was as a person. I think I took school seriously, but not so seriously, right? Like I was an A and B student. I wasn't an A+ student. But the reason I was an A, B student is because I was also working in the real world my first year of law school. I was going out and making these connections that today are some of my best clients. I was, I had businesses while I was in law school. Like I owned my own businesses.
That's awesome.
I had businesses when I was a lawyer. Like I've done all these things, and I'm huge on the idea of balance. And that goes not just for like work and play, although yes, but also for like take school seriously, but still have a life. And to your point, again, when I like give advice to like younger entrepreneurs or law students or whatever, I'm like, if you have nothing to relate to people about because all you've ever done is read a book, like a law book, not a recreational book, then like, what are you going to talk to people about? Because ultimately, being a lawyer, if you are sufficiently intelligent to get into law school and you read the books and you do the things, like you're gonna probably become a lawyer. And then what? Right? What are you going to talk to your clients about? How are you going to make them feel connected? How are you going to take an interest? Like, there needs to be more. If not, you're just one of the masses.
Are you inherently interesting? I think is the number one question. Because even with building a business or anything that takes like, for most people, 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, sometimes it's easy to just kind of live in that and be okay with living in that and being like, well, I'm really focused. But then that over a 3, 6, 12 month span, you start to lose your relatability to the world because 99% of people don't live like that. So you have to be able to work extraordinarily hard to get what you want, but at the same time, keep these core pieces of your personality to then, actually show up in a competitive landscape.
Absolutely. And listen, I think there's also, me and one of my friends recently, we were talking about like seasons. And so I believe in balance in every respect, but balance can be hour by hour, day by day, week by week, minute, and then like season by season. And so for example, like when you're a law student and you're going to take the bar, grind season, like you didn't see me outside, right? But then right after, okay, I did 2 weeks of traveling and doing all these things or whatever, right? So balance in that overall season.
Yeah.
And so that's okay too, right? I don't ever want to get so caught up. It's like, okay, you need to go play outside. And they're like, okay, but then I can't figure it out, but find that overall balance and that relatability, I think is super important also for entrepreneurs, right? Because if you have no idea what's going on outside, how is your product still going to benefit somebody or your service? Or like you said, relatability is crucial. And I think that comes from, being outside.
Yeah.
What businesses did you start and were running while you were in law school?
Interesting question. So I always say my first business was a lemonade stand when I was 8. And I've never not had a business since.
He's still the guy. He stops at every lemonade stand that we pass.
Every single one.
Good.
Yeah, I love those people that do that.
Those are the future entrepreneurs.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Right. And it's funny because we had this lemonade stand in my neighborhood and I was the youngest of like the neighborhood kids. But at the end of every day, they'd be like, Brenda, you manage the money. Like, you take it home. And I would, like, count it. And then they would $81.34, right? And I was 8 at the time. I'm still friends with a lot of those people, actually. And I've never not had a job or a business since, except for my first year of law school, which they technically don't let you. So then the second semester, I got one.
Nice.
But I've owned a really wide array of businesses. So in college, I owned... was an artist development company. 2 of those artists are now, one is like a pretty famous actor / singer. And one I haven't spoken to in a while, but I'm pretty sure he's still doing music. We then ran a promotion company in college. With one of my friends.
That will teach you sales like nobody's business.
But this was like before promoters were like a thing. And basically what we did, so one of my good friends was on the football team. And the hierarchy of college is such that, like, if football players go, sorority girls go, if sorority girls go, frat boys go, if frat boys go, regular people go, on and on and on. And so we understood that hierarchy. He had the captive audience of his boys in the football team. And so the same bar that everybody would go to for free every other day, we basically were like, we're going to charge $20 a head. And they were like, okay.
Wow.
And we just started doing really well. And so that was in college. I've had, my brother still gets mad at me, but I invented Uber Eats in college.
That's awesome.
What do you mean?
So in Chicago, it gets very cold and whatever. And I'm old enough that Uber Eats did not exist when I was in college. We won't say how old. And I was like, I can't believe that the only thing I can get delivered to my dorm is a pizza. Like, we live on a college campus with like all these different, vendors. I can't get anything but Domino's. And so I was like, why don't we do a delivery thing? And my brother was like, it's never going to work. And, they're doing fine.
Yeah, right. They're doing okay.
They figured it out, I think.
So then, from there, I owned a boxing gym.
Oh.
I owned a Croatian yacht charter company. I've owned.
This is all while you're in law school.
No, so the boxing gym was right after law school. While I was in law school, I was a dance teacher and I interned at like a lot of places because I do believe that you need to actually go feel and do a job before you have any credibility in saying you want to do it or you don't want to do it. So I went and I did the things. I worked at an entertainment management firm when I was in college. That was a really fun, very interesting little stint.
What was that? What was that dynamic like?
So I actually
in LA, not to mind
it
you.
was
So
in
it's
LA.
the hub.
It was in LA at the peak of LA entertainment.
Yeah.
Like, not what it is now that it's more spread out. It was like prime. I actually had this professor. He was the owner of the firm. His name was Jeff Quatnitz, who came in to guest lecture once a week at Northwestern. And it was this class about like entertainment and whatever. I was obsessed with the class. We finished the semester and I walked up to him at the end of class. And this is like a nice lesson for people. And I was like, hi, can I come work for you? And he was like, sure. And I literally called my mom from class and I was like, Ma, can I move to LA for a few months? And she was like, sure.
That's
why
awesome.
not? And this is again, wow, I'm really aging myself today, but I went on Craigslist to find a place to live. And I'm still here, so I did not get killed. But I found an apartment in near UCLA, and I roomed with 3 random guys that I had never met. And my dad took me up there to make sure that I was okay and whatever. And I spent, I think 4 months basically shadowing him. And I worked everywhere from the mailroom, literally delivering mail and making coffee, to sitting at the desk while I was patching calls through for Lil Wayne and the Backstreet Boys.
That's sick.
And I was like, this is awesome, right? And making Leonardo DiCaprio's coffee for his board meeting. So it was really cool, and it was great because it was a really interesting situation where I was very much in the mailroom, the gritty, not fancy at all, not glamorous, but because the actual CEO of the company was a mentor of mine, he would randomly call and be like, come sit in this meeting. And so I got to experience these unbelievable meetings at the peak and the growth of incredible careers of people that are today impossibly, big. And then I also got to live in the mailroom and that culture and understanding the way up and sitting at a desk as an assistant. And so it was super, super rewarding. I got to go to cool movie premieres. I got to do that LA thing at its peak when I was in my 20s.
And that stoked the fire that you were like, I got to get back here in a different, where you now are.
So interesting. So I think as a kid, I've always loved the arts and creatives. I love, I now own a law firm for creatives. And it's a law firm that essentially, I love to say the creatives are people who build something out of nothing. And that's a really broad way to say it, but a business is a creative endeavor. Writing a song, creating choreography, putting on an event, right? It's you're bringing an idea to life, you're creating. And so I think I've always just been super enamored with the magic of creatives. And I've had that since I was a little kid. I was a dancer as a kid, and I'm still friends with my dance friends. One of them, who's now a client of mine and now a world-renowned artistic director, choreographer, just a force.
Yeah.
Actually, a man who's fully changing the dance industry. But he always says, you were one of the first people to see magic inside of me, and that then catapulted. And so
That's cool.
The ability to kind of be a little bit of a puzzle piece to people that have this magic that I am so enamored with is really so fulfilling for me. So I think that started very early for me, and loving people that were creative and exciting, that to me is fulfilling. And I thought it would be the traditional route of being Ari Gold. I based my life off of Ari Gold, just to be clear.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite
built our
character.
business. We actually built
Yeah.
our business. I told these guys back in college that I wanted to live out Entourage in real life.
Yeah.
Actually.
1,000%.
It's my favorite show.
As it should be.
Yeah.
So I actually had my Ari Gold Entourage moment peak this summer.
You did?
I did.
Tell us.
I got on a private jet with 3 of my closest clients / friends right? That same little like crew moment. And we got on this private jet and we looked around and I was like, I'm Ari Gold.
Yep.
Like, I've done it.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
And we were going for like a business-ish thing, but it was also like my close friends. And it was this like peak moment. And it's funny because my mom knows that I've wanted to be Ari Gold my whole life. And when I told her that we were going to do this, she's like, you're having your Ari Gold moment. And I was like, yes. And
That's
like
awesome.
sick.
That is so cool.
But yeah, so I thought that I was going to just like traditionally be like an agent or a manager or whatever. And while I was working in LA at that management firm, my mentor at the time was like, you're going to get stuck here. Like, you're going to basically be a manager forever. Go to law school. You'll always have a place here. Just go to law school, get the degree. If you want to come back, you forever have a place. So I was like, okay, fine. I go to law school and I realize that entertainment attorneys are really, there's no such thing. What I mean by that is that there's employment attorneys, there's attorneys that deal with the finances of movies and things like that. There's attorneys that deal with intellectual property, with business, but it's really all these different types of lawyers that are servicing celebrities, right? So I'm like, okay, what else is exciting, right? Because I didn't want to be like a union attorney. So I was like, okay, what else is exciting? I was like, okay, like celebrities get in trouble. I'll just, be on Suits.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'll be a criminal defense attorney. So I did that. I was a public defender for 3 years. Super rewarding, super exciting. I was like in jail 2-3 times a week. I have insane stories from that time in life. And I did like 100 trials to verdict, which makes you very good at thinking on your feet. And then I started to reach a ceiling and I was like, okay, what else excites me? And so somehow in a very twisted path, I ended where I am now, which is being a business and intellectual property attorney for creatives. And so somehow I found my way to that place and that passion that I absolutely love. But it wasn't this like, I'm going to be an entertainment attorney, so I'm going to go to LA and I'm going to work at a studio and I'm going to do these things. It was more just like, let me do things that really excite me and that I really am interested in, while still kind of keeping an ear out for, like you said, right, the connection to the things that were relevant for me.
I want to double click on that because I think understanding law, like going through everything you go through, you probably understand human psychology at a level that like I like get weird, like I nerd out about that type of stuff, like thinking why people are the way that they are. Creatives, I have this hunch that they have it's no secret, but they have a bigger ego. But I think it's because of this idea of something didn't exist, even from a business owner perspective. Something didn't exist, it was in your head, and then you made it, you created it. How is that differed from going from managing, people that you're having to make sure that they don't spend their life in prison or something like that, to then dealing with these types of people that personality types probably completely different, maybe the same?
Yeah, I have so much to say about what you just said. I'm like foaming at the mouth in the best way. So first, you said they have a bigger ego, and I respectfully disagree, and here's why. I don't actually think it's ego. Some people have an ego, for sure. But sometimes I see it as, and I don't know if you've read the Rick Rubin book.
I love that book.
So if you're a true creative that sees yourself as a vessel for building something bigger, and you become obsessed with this idea that it is your mission to bring this to life, it's a frustration and it's a dedication and it's this energy inside of you that it's not ego, it's like a mission. And it's not coming from a place of like, I'm so important that listen to me. It's my mission is so clear and it's so necessary. Please pay attention. And so I think that people who don't intimately understand creatives see it as ego, and people that can really connect with creatives and understand that the reason that they want you to listen or they want you to see or they want you to understand is because this is bigger than them. Right. And so it's not an ego play for them. It's this idea of like, this matters and I'm trying to show you, like, look. Right.
Like this is the social impact of me doing this, or this is the impact of.
Right.
Yeah.
So that to your first point. To your second point, I love what you said, because I think that working at the public defender's office was one of the most useful set of tools that I've ever learned. And, we talked about thinking on your feet. We talked about, a lesson that you teach 4-year-olds, which is be kind to everyone, right? And I can't tell you how many people I would see in a courtroom treat like the bailiff like, oh, you're just the bailiff. Where's the judge? I would bring coffee for everybody. Like, you get a colada, you get a colada, like, right? Like, and all of those things ended up really mattering, right? And as they should. And so those, basic life skills, but then this idea of translating English to English. And I always say this, right? And when you first started the public defender's office, they were like, okay, you have paid for a very fancy education. I call it my expensive art, like all my diplomas, expensive art. You've paid for a fancy education. You've gotten this degree. You've done all these awesome things. Forget it. Stop talking like you're reading out of a book. You're talking to human beings. And so at the first day of the public defender's office, everybody's like so excited that they're finally learning, like, well, wherefore? And they're like, stop. They're like, your jury is like a normal human that wants to be spoken to like a normal human. And if they actually want you to understand, if you want them to understand, you need to speak to them in something that they understand. And so I think that the best way to show that you know something is to be able to simplify it to regular terms. And so the duality of speaking English to English, and I mean that like boardroom to creative, a potential, somebody at the public defender's office who couldn't afford an attorney and maybe wasn't given the privilege of a great education, and a jury, or him and a judge, or a juvenile, which I represented for 2 years, who's maybe like 9 years old, and then their parent. All these different translations, right? A creative to a business person, a creative to a legal document, which is the worst thing you could do to them, right? So all these different translations, but I'm always speaking English.
Yeah.
Right? And so translating English to English, I think the first place that I very intimately and quickly and directly learned that skill was there.
That's interesting.
Do you have any horror stories from
Horror stories? Yes. I don't know if they're like PG-13,
okay.
but
Let it fly. This is the environment.
I was a young lady that would wear, suits, but like as a woman, you wear like suits and heels, and it's Miami-Dade, so you can wear like heels.
Yeah.
And and so we would go to court, and some of these gentlemen were very excited by some of us. And so I had one time, for example, this guy, I went to visit a client in jail, and like they put you in this room. It's like a room smaller than this, and there's like a window, and you can see other people walking by that are like, in the jail at the time. And I remember like 2 or 3 guys walking by and like grabbing a water fountain and just like starting to hump the water fountain as they were like dead staring at me in the eye. And I was like, this is rough.
That's crazy.
I've had a lot of like, hey ma, like, hey mommy, like, how you doing? And I'm just like, I'm your attorney.
Yeah.
Weird, crazy things do happen. Like, and I feel absolutely terrible because these are situations of people that like mentally, it's just the conditions sometimes are just really bad. And so like you see things and you're just like, this is not okay, But it also kind of speaks to the desperation of, there's a lot of mental health issues within like people that are in jail and all these different things, especially at the public defender's office. And you become so aware of like how much help people need and like how short-sighted a lot of, the system is. I used to have juvenile judges that would always make fun of me because every kid that I would represent, they'd be like, do you want to adopt this one too? And I'm like, kind of. Like, they just need help. Like, you know what I mean? They're not bad kids. But it was also super rewarding and interesting. I learned a lot of, like, lingo, right? Like, I didn't know what a lot of these, like, 14, 15-year-olds were like, oh, like, yeah, I don't know. Now they're probably like in their 20s. So like they don't even say that stuff anymore, but I still have clients that like say things to me and I'm like, oh yeah. I literally have a client that like calls me. This is like a very important client, and he runs a very successful business. He'll have me, sup twin? And I'm like, hey, like client, like, how are you? We're like, nah, like no cap. And I'm just like, hello.
Yeah, nice to talk to you.
It's like when you were dealing with like when you were doing the criminal stuff and like they were doing all these crazy things, like how did that take a toll on you? And were you ever like, why am I helping these people? Why am I doing this?
Great question. I have this like weird ability to not take work home with me.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yes. These days a little bit, I take it home a little bit more just because the world in general is 24/7, 365. And I'm dealing in the creative industries, which necessitates more flexibility.
Yeah.
It's also a blessing because sometimes it is Tuesday and I'm on a boat or here filming a podcast,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then sometimes it's a Saturday, I'm on a flight to New York to sit with my client and have a meeting on Saturday at 6 p.m. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
So, but generally at the public defender's office, it was a very unique ability because it does get super heavy, right? Especially with kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like really insane situations. But I would just go home and be like, okay, I'm gonna leave, and like that was it, and I would go live my life. As far as feeling like, wow, I shouldn't be defending these people or et cetera. It's a great question because a lot of people don't understand how the criminal justice system works, and so they're like, you're defending a burglar? It's like, well, kind of, but kind of not.
Allegedly?
Always allegedly, correct. Very good.
Familiar with allegedly.
Correct. Very good. The actual role of a defense attorney is to ensure that the state attorney is, or the government, whoever's charging your client of a crime, is fully able to prove what they're charging your client with. And there's the Supreme Court Justice Scalia that says better to have 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to jail.
Yeah.
Right? And so your job as a public defender or as a criminal defense attorney in general is to make sure that no innocent people go to jail. Your job is not actually to prove innocence.
Right.
It's to ensure that the government can prove what they're accusing someone of so that no innocent people go to jail. And so that very much gets lost in the sauce of like what we do every day. But the true, genuine role of a defense attorney is checks and balances. It's let's make sure you can actually prove that this person did this before we send them off, and punish them.
How did that change your outlook on like the big question, but like how did that change your outlook on humanity as a whole? Like seeing such a
that's an interesting question. I think some people would be frustrated, whereas I felt an insane level of empathy. Especially, like I said, I worked in the juvenile division for 2 years out of like my stint there. And with kids, it's even a whole different level. I can't tell you how many kids would come to me and be like, you're the first person to listen to me. Didn't matter if we won or lost. They'd be like, you're the first person to actually hear me out. And I'm just like, this is broken.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be here and so these are extreme examples. Like, you stole a honey bun from the gas station. Like, why are you in jail?
Yeah.
Like, you're hungry. Like, so, but then I also was around some people that I'm like, you're not a good person. Like, there was no need for you to do this. You've ruined this family. You've really hurt somebody. And so, of course, but I think I've always thought there were good and bad people in the world, and I just still think that. I just think I had a little bit more of an insight, and things are never as straightforward as they look on an arrest form, right? We would get the arrest form, I would read it, and then I would sit, and I'd say 95% of the time they'd be like, yes, that happened, but let me tell you what, the whole story, right? And I can tell you the first experience I had at the public defender's office, I was fortunate professionally, not because this happened. I was third chair in an attempted murder case. And you hear attempted murder and you're just like, wow.
What does third chair mean?
Third chair. So first chair is like the lead attorney. Second chair would be like the second lead, kind of like the hierarchy.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
I was like in the back.
Okay.
I was very, very young in my career. And, at first you're like, an attempted murder, like that's insane, right? And you read the arrest form and it's like he pulled out a knife and he slit him open from top to bottom, and the guy didn't die, and so it's an attempted murder. And I was like, whoa, this is really intense. And then I sat with the client for the first time, and he's like, me and this guy that have been friends for a very long time were at a party. We were both wasted. We got into an argument. We both started fighting. He pulled out a knife. I pulled out a knife. And as we were grappling, he got cut. And I'm not justifying any of those actions, but that's not what I read on the arrest form.
Okay, yeah.
And so I say that to say that sometimes it is as straightforward as it seems, and some people do heinous things. And sometimes, it's worthwhile to get to know the story or the people or whatever. And I think that that's a lesson that applies to everyone in every respect, right? Really, really not judging the book by the cover or the crime by the A form.
I think it's that one level of, because when you're talking about juveniles, most of the time, and this is entirely impossible to prove in a court of law, but even if they do something let's say it's borderline, it's not stealing a honey bun, but you're still not
stealing Jordans from somebody's house, breaking and entering. Tons of those.
Exactly, but then you go a little bit deeper and you're like, this person had zero help at all through their life, and we're supposed to sit here and judge them based on
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think it was sometimes they knew what they were doing. There was a lot of, it's so much deeper than this, right? A lot of times the kids would be like, I was on super high off Percocet. I don't actually remember any of this. And I would show them the video of them breaking into a house and stealing shoes. And they'd be like, oh, wow, that is me. And I'm like,
That's insane.
wow, like
crazy.
what is going on in your life that you're 14, 15 years old and you're doing drugs? Like, what's going on, you know? And what I will give credit to, at least the attempt, and obviously, you know, the justice system has a lot of work to do, but in the juvenile system, a lot of times it is a rehabilitation type of system. And so the idea would be, okay, let's deal with the crime because it's real and it happened, and you're not just gonna like pretend nothing happened, right? We're gonna, you know, the judge is gonna, whatever the case may be. But after that, it's like, okay, now how do we get you to a place where you're not doing drugs all the time, or you have an interest in like cooking? Let's put you in some sort of like chef program, because like that's where you see some sort of like fulfillment or joy, or right, or like, oh, are there issues at home? Like, let's talk about them, let's fix them. And so I think what I loved about working the juvenile system is that there was real opportunity to actually like help people in a different way. Not saying that the things they did weren't wrong. Like, there was still somebody whose house got broken into and whose shoes were gone, and like that's also not okay, right? But the idea is to then make sure you help the kid enough that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you do it and sometimes you don't. But the juvenile system is very different than the adult system.
I know this is it's probably a loaded question, but I interned in a jail for 6 months.
Okay.
So and part of it was juvenile as well. Like, what are your thoughts on like the juvenile? So at least I'm assuming it's across the board in the state of Florida, but like they would get arrested and they would be in jail for 21 days was the max, I think.
That is
if I remember correctly.
You need to be arraigned within 21 days.
21 days. And I remember I was talking to one of the kids at one point, and he fully admitted, he was like, it's just better here than home. So basically, he would go in for 21 days, he would get out, and then he would purposely do something to get sent back. So it's like, again, I guess this is a loaded question, but like, what is the fix to that?
Oh, the fix is a ginormously loaded question. And if I had the exact answer, I would run for president. It's so many different moving parts that need work. Right? It's resources, it's funding, it's a belief system, it's culture, it's so many things that all at once need to get better. And I think some things are, and I think some things aren't. And, you know, but I can actually give you examples of that, not just for juveniles. I had older men who were in prison and would get out, and they'd be like, my life after having been in prison on the outside world is impossible for me to handle. So they would commit crimes that were just enough to get them back in prison.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that was the standard, or, you know, or anybody wants to be in prison by any means. Yeah. But there is such a psychological element to all of this. And also the rehabilitation of somebody coming back into the real world when they either A, haven't been for a very long time, or B, when there are a lot of obstacles that aren't easy to navigate, you know, after having been through that. And I'll give you a simpler example. Let's not even go that extreme. My brother the other day got like a parking ticket and didn't know about it. And they were like going to suspend his license. He literally just didn't know. And he got some notice in the mail. And he's like, Brenda, I am a college educated, very successful man. And I had to like phone for help. You know, it was impossible to get to the bottom of it. And so sometimes the system is not set up to make things easy in certain respects, right? And, you know, my brother's like one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And so I'm like, if you can't figure it out, the general public definitely cannot figure it out, right? And so things like that, which I think there are fixes to those things. And so,
It seems like you had like two types of clients. Like, there's good people in bad circumstances, and then they said like there's just bad people. How did you like stay level and represent them the same? Like,
again, I'm gonna go like yoga poster on you. I don't think there are good or bad people.
Okay.
I think there are people that do good or bad things.
Okay.
However, that's very yogi of me. I don't even do that much yoga, but I do think that that's true, right? I think that like people are super multidimensional, and their product, a lot of their circumstance, their moment, their environment, their mood, their mental health, like we're so complex. So anyways, What was the question?
So it's like, yeah. So it's like, they're not good or bad people, but
Yes.
it's like you said, some people do like heinous things,
Yes, absolutely,
right?
which is inexcusable.
Yeah. So it's like the person that does like a heinous thing, like,
Oh,
it's
like
a
how do I
murder,
represent them?
like compared to the kid that stole a honey bun, like how are you able to represent them the same, show up the same for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes you can't, and then
Yeah.
you don't, and you excuse yourself from a case.
Yeah,
I had some very like lines that I felt very comfortable excusing myself from a case when I felt that I could not properly represent somebody because morally, my morals and ethics are probably abundantly like to the point that my mom makes fun of me sometimes. So there are just some lines I just won't cross. However, there were situations where like I knew somebody had committed a crime, like would fully admit it to me. And I still felt comfortable enough to make the state prove it. So again,
Right.
not to prove their innocence, but to say, are you sure you guys can prove it? And what I can tell you to give you a little bit of hope about how this usually works is most of the time that these people would be like, yes, I did this, the state could prove it.
Yeah.
So 9 times out of 10, we were negotiating plea deals, or again, I'm speaking very generally and overly broad, but you know, in that respect, it was rare that I was like, I know 100% this person did it, and it's something like really aggressive. Not like the kid had a bag of marijuana.
Right.
I'm okay with that. Like I'm perfectly fine the kid being like, yeah, I had it, and me still getting him off.
Yeah.
I sleep very easy at night when that happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, you know, you have your boundaries and you stick to those. And I will say the public defender's office in Miami, I have nothing but praise for them. One, they circled the most elite group of human beings I've ever met as far as like the people that they hire. I don't know what algorithm they had, but like exceptional, brilliant humans. Two, I think that they were really respectful of understanding like morals, values, boundaries, and just like, hey, you don't feel comfortable? No problem. Like, right? Because they also wanted whoever was going to be representing this person to put their best foot forward and give them the representation they deserve. So, yeah.
Now, you transitioning careers in a sense, like you're kind of playing in a whole different world after this stint. How do you position yourself in a market that is so saturated like Miami for what you do?
Well, one, we're worldwide, but two,
Fair enough.
but two, you know, I think the same way anyone does, or anyone that does it well, and it's my entire business is relationship based. I'm not the best lawyer in the world. I think I'm very good, but I think part of what makes me very good is my connection to my clients. I intimately understand who they are, what they need, and to your point of like psychology being such an element of law, it's not only psychology with my clients, but I think that I really am very in tune with the other side as human beings, right? And so, hey, how do we negotiate a deal understanding their pressure points versus just being like stubborn, or like getting to know people's why is usually the quickest way to get to a resolution or to get what you want, right? Your why may be this and my why may be that, and we can both get exactly what we want, but we're fighting for no. So I think that there's a million watch companies, but I still buy Rolex. I don't know. Like, you know?
Yeah. I
And
totally get your
say
point.
that to say
That's
that
a
like,
bar.
yes, I think that I think there's room for everybody. I really do. And I think that like there's so many entrepreneurs and so many creatives, and you're gonna find your match. And what we've been able to build, and you know, my business partner is the yin to my yang. He is my exact opposite, but complement, right? And that also is super fruitful for us because we can service such a wide array of clients, and one of us will resonate with them, and one of us will connect with them. And I think we're both, you know, he's a brilliant lawyer, and he's much more like detail oriented and meticulous and cross the T and dot the I. And I'm like big picture, solution,
Yeah.
creative, think outside the box. But together, that is an insanely powerful dynamic.
How is building, because you've built plenty of businesses, what is the dynamic of building a law firm versus like a normal service-based business or anything like
It's
that?
the exact same, and people don't get that.
Interesting.
And I have so many lawyers come to me and be like, oh, I want to go out on my own and I want to start my own practice. And do I know enough about the law? I'm like, maybe. Do you know how to run a business?
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, my business partner will tell you, my business partner is a brilliant lawyer, but I'm primarily a business person. Right? right? And I say primarily in that, like, I'm obviously a lawyer and that is my core, foundation.
But I understand what you're saying with the yin to the yang type of thing. Yeah.
Right. And so our business, our law firm is a business. It is a service business, right? And how you market, how you service a client, what your customer service is like, what your corporate culture is like, all of that is so relevant. And so just being a good lawyer is not good enough. In the same way that you guys know, having a great product, not good enough. Having a great service, not good enough. And so I do think we offer an elite level service, but that's just not enough.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that running a law firm is like running every other business, except your product is the law.
That makes sense. Now, when you think to dealing with these different array of human beings, and you find that person who you're like, this person either has it or they don't.
Yes.
Common traits. What have you seen?
Common traits of like a natural born hustler,
Just high performers.
high performance individuals.
Yeah.
Such a great question. Common denominator. Do you want me to tell you what I actually have found or what I would like to say they all have?
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Both.
I would like to really champion the idea of effective communication.
Okay.
Totally agree with you.
I think that plays into leadership. I think that plays into marketing. I think that plays into team, right? Team dynamics. So not just communication, but effective communication. Self-awareness, I think, is super important. I think everybody fucks up. It's just like, are you aware that you fucked up? And then can you be better? I think there's a level of innate ambition that you just cannot teach. And I had a dance teacher when I was little that used to say, I can teach you the steps, but I can't teach you to dance. And I think that you can teach somebody how to run a business and you can teach somebody how to build it. But that ambition, that's the dance. And so you either have it or you don't. And I think that innate ambition and that drive and that thing that like excites you. And it's funny because I deal with a lot of young entrepreneurs a lot of times, right? Because we represent everything from like the mom and pop entrepreneur to publicly traded companies to make mega conglomerates of like worldwide hospitality companies, right? And the smaller entrepreneurs come to me and I actually love those meetings because to me they're the most exciting, right? It's like we're at the ground floor.
We literally had this the other week.
Exactly.
So,
You'll see me. I'll get like amped on the call. Okay, we got to do this. And like, like I am amped. And so, but there's two types of people every time. There's the person that leaves that meeting and they're like, whoa, this is a lot. And there's the other person that runs home to their laptop and they're like, I can't wait. This is so exciting. Guys, we got to meet up. Like, what are we doing next? And like every time. And the guys that are like just filled up by that conversation are typically the ones that are sufficiently passionate about whatever they're doing, being that vessel for whatever that mission is, that get it done. And the ones that are overwhelmed by it typically get in their own way. I'm not saying that they're not brilliant, but they get in their own way.
And action is I look at action and your ability to act on intuition, I guess, is like because we talk about it all the time. If let's say in the effective communication aspect of it, if you have somebody that you need to talk to and you need to have an uncomfortable conversation with, your gap between knowing that that's the reality to solving that reality is really where in business, I would say that's where it's won or lost because you could look at, okay, if it takes you 2 weeks to have a conversation that took somebody 2 hours to have, their iteration cycle, their ability to move and kind of move these objects out of their way.
Absolutely. Motion is everything.
Yes.
Motion is everything. Right. And that time. And again, these are things though that you can improve on. Right. So you can teach the steps. But if innately you're somebody that just gets it, you're going to get there faster. But
I will say to give you flower, like I've had so many conversations with lawyers that just didn't understand our business. And so when I'm trying to both educate them on why what we're doing is actually important. Right. And then at the same time be like, how can you help me do what we're trying to do better? And we got on this call, and by the end of the call, I knew exactly what paperwork we needed to be able to position ourselves in a way to then attract VC, private equity, these different things that is a part of our long-term goal. And your ability to summarize that in a 15-minute call was like, I give you a lot of credit because that
Thank
was
you. I appreciate that. That means a lot because I think that that's something that they don't teach you in law school, and it's a skill, right?
Yes.
And it's a skill that sometimes you forget has value because at this point in my career and in my life, it's second nature to me, right? I hear it, I'm like, yes, here, and it's really, so thank you for that, because I think that it becomes so second nature that you don't realize that it's a valuable skill that you can give to somebody else. And I think that ultimately our main role is to add value. And so if anything that I can do is adding value, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So thank you.
How do you cast out your vision for the future doing what you're doing? Like, are you in a position where you could just do this forever and like it wouldn't be, you could just 40 years go by, or how do you plan for the future?
That's a great question. And I'll give you two answers. And I wanted to say something, but I don't want to forget what I'm about to say, but I want to say something. You said, we were talking about people getting in their own way and action and all these things, and a really quick little tidbit. So oftentimes people are like, oh, I'm working on a business plan. And a business plan is essentially, it can be a never-ending document. And it actually should be to an extent.
A living document, yeah.
It should be a living document, not a never-ending document. And so oftentimes people come to my office and they're like, oh, I have this idea, but I'm working on my business plan. Like, how long have you been working on your business plan? And they're like, 6 months. And I'm like, stop it. You stop it right now. Yeah. And so I always give them my 3-page business plan. I'm like, 3 pages, no more. And for when you're starting business, 3 pages. Page 1, elevator pitch. Page 2, your avatar. Your avatar is like your NBA 2K player, your, whatever, the actual personification of your core customer, right? What they look like, what they read, where they shop, how much they make, what they eat, how they sleep, what they care about, etc. And then the outer rings around that avatar. And then your 3rd page is some level of financials. What do you need to get started? What do you need to break even? And what does projections look like for A scenario, B scenario, C scenario? And then stop. Stop it, right? Go outside and actually share it with the world and build it and do it. And then be flexible enough to know that this is going to continue to change. And you're going to continue adding pages. And you're going to change the elevator pitch because now you've done it 25 times and you're perfect. And that's okay. So just to say, action and getting in your own way. And sometimes you can over prepare. Right?
I think it's impossible, especially when you're talking about that avatar. We've been running our business for 3.5 years. That avatar, at least my experience, selling to a bunch of avatars and knowing over time, like in a service-based business, who actually fit the mold the most is what gave us the information to now. I know exactly who they are, what they all those different aspects, and most people can't answer that before you've actually done it.
Exactly. But what they try to do is they try to be able to answer it before they can start. So I'm like, just build one. Build one based on your best faith efforts of what you think it is.
Yeah.
And then try, right?
Yeah.
So build that 3-page plan and then go outside. Yeah. Right? And then come back to it and revise it and make it better until at some point when you're going to start getting ready to go VC, to do all these things, you're now going to be ready because you started and you've had the ability to be flexible enough in tweaking until you're getting to a good place. So anyways, we definitely went off course. But to answer your question, I've been having this conversation a lot lately. So I think that I get what I call creative FOMO. And what I mean by that is I have the absolute fortune of being surrounded by some of the most brilliant creatives, at least to me, people that I just absolutely admire their innate ability to be creative. And I wish I had a better word than creative, but it's so multidimensional. It's not just like they're artists or they're fashion designers or they're creative direct. No, these people can look at you and be like, oh, but we could do this. And I'm just like, sick. Right. And so they're just innately creative. And they, as I'm around them and a lot of the people that I get to be around have such a clear goal and vision. And they're like 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. This is what we're doing. They can manifest vision boards and, all these things. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. As a person who loves organization and checklists and goals and all these things, right? I'm super, super like organized and type A and work and all these things. That sounds so attractive to me. However, so I tried to force that idea for myself. I'm like, okay, where do I want to be in 1 year? And how do I want to get there? And what are the very tangible goals of things I could do. And then I'm going to be flexible in the route, but I'm like, no, it just, I can't. I hate the word I can't, but like, that's not how I've built my business. And it's not how I am going to build the next chapter. And I got to a place where I was very much at peace with that. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not intentional about a lot of things. That doesn't mean that I don't have goals and I don't have things that I want for my career, for my life, for all these things. But it means that there's two ways to get somewhere. And one is incredibly intentional and one is abundantly organic. And I have been very blessed that it has been so organic that when I tried to force into this idea of being super intentional, it became forced and it wouldn't work.
Matthew McConaughey, I listened, when I heard this from Matthew McConaughey, he said that 40% of the great things that happened to his life happened through like basically, luck, as somebody would say. But the ability, when I think of planning that very like clear road, that very clear direction, you actually shutter yourself off from the ability for nuance to fall into place. I'd be interested, do you then optimize for the 24 hours that you have and use that as your barometer of like, where am I going in your mind?
Listen, I do have certain goals, like in general, right? So even if the goal is something like balance, even if the goal is something like I need to really take care of myself and like the gym is a non-negotiable for me.
Is that a habit or is that a goal in your mind? Like
me making sure that I prioritize my well-being is a goal.
Okay.
It is the habit that ensures that I meet that goal. Right? I think work-wise though, and me and my business partner actually laugh about this, and I joke with him all the time because at the every quarter he sits and he's like, let's come up with goals. And I was like, okay, more. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what am I gonna do? Put a number?
Yeah.
That's short-sighted. What am I gonna do? Put an amount of clients? That's silly. What am I gonna do? Right? And so he's like, no, we should have like this thing that we want to reach. And I'm like, more is I wake up every day and it's more, right? And not in like the greedy way. Like I think there's a balance of like feeling really fulfilled, which I do, but the goal is more, right? More
Capitalism.
Fulfillment, more excitement, more impact, more value, more money, more whatever, right? So I think that there are goals, but I don't know that they're so traditional in like, here's a dollar amount I want to reach, or I want to, I have no vision of like merging my firm into like a giant mega firm. I love our team. I love that I walk in and some days I'm wearing, one of my clients' hoodies and sneakers, and other days I'm wearing like a suit. And I love that my team can do that as well. And that, that my employees are friends, and that our office is bright, and that sometimes I'll like play loud music and they get really annoyed, and like, that's okay,
Yeah.
So I think that those are goals for me, right? To continue to build a corporate culture within my company that I am really proud of, and that people are like, one of my employees literally twice a week comes to me and he's like, I love working here. And I'm like, that's the best thing I could ever hear. Because we're lawyers, like our job's not that fun on the day to day. Like, and he writes all day. Right? He is very much more a lawyer than I am.
Yeah.
And he's just so excited to be there. And I'm like, that for me is like, that is reaching a goal for me. Right?
But in that way, it seems as though it's the optimization of the 24 that you have, like the 24 hours that you have. Because I see the goal setting aspect, I see that as people that are currently in a situation that they're not content with.
Okay.
And they want to set a goal to, it's really like get freedom, get like reach a certain monetary amount. But we talked about this. If it's not optimizing for freedom, and freedom looks different to everybody, but if it is that, dollar amount, whatever it is, in a lot of ways it's empty. At least that's my opinion on it. And optimizing for the here and now, and then just allowing yourself to be open to nuance, to opportunity, and these types of things. I feel like that's not that there's a better or worse, but I think in this specific business and what you're talking about, I think it's a better way to go about it.
Totally. I mean, listen, I think there's merit to both methods. And I think it's very specific to A, the person, and B, the industry.
I was going to say, because if you're going to VC and you're like,
hey, I'm here and maybe you guys like me. Maybe what's up?
Yeah.
Nah,
Not gonna work.
And listen, I think like obviously this is all on a spectrum, but yeah. And listen, I think that I am in a moment of transition, but I don't necessarily know what I'm transitioning to or from, or in what category of my life.
Yeah.
But I think we're all in constant motion, and I think that motion, if you allow, I call this phase of my life an amoeba, because I think it's like taking shape into something, but I'm not sure what. And I learned to be okay with that. And I learned to just really embrace that, like, I'm going to enjoy the parts of it that I really enjoy, and I'm going to be okay with being uncomfortable in not knowing exactly why I'm sitting here on a Friday morning doing a podcast instead of checking my emails.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be like, this feels good and right. And, you talked about gut and intuition. And while I'm not a traditional creative, if I am in a situation where I'm connecting with somebody or it feels right or it feels good, I'll figure out how that adds value to the bigger picture as it happens. But if you are sufficiently in tune with that intuition or that gut or that magic or whatever you want to title it, somehow it all kinds of gets to where it needs to go.
I think goal setting and like a chief definite aim, I think those are two opposite ends of the spectrum, because a goal, again, it's numeric. It's like, I want to get this amount of clients. But then if somebody said, hey, what if I gave you double? Like, you're not going to say no. Like, yeah. But a chief definite aim which is more objective. It's like it's not so like pinpoint.
And listen, I can give you examples of where I think that goal setting has been really fruitful. Like, I've had clients be like, I want to eventually do a deal with this brand, right?
That's awesome.
Or I want to, I can see collaborating with this artist or this situation, or I want to put on an event and I want it to look like this, and I want to really change the game in this way. And those are goals, and those are very tangible. And I have seen people really, this is the goal, and wake up and be like, yeah, no, that, like, check by check, you did every single thing, right? And I have one of my good friends and one of my clients, and very recently we sat down and I was like, you have a new notepad? Because, like, we checked every box, right? So every box of goal that he had for himself, even the goals that we were like, that's wild.
Yeah.
And they were happening. And he was like, oh shit, like, let's dream bigger, right?
And the other side of that, though, is like, we train for races all the time. And I think one of the most dangerous parts of training for a race
what kind of races?
Like ultra marathons, like
running.
Yeah. But the most dangerous point of that is the 2 weeks after.
Okay.
Because there's this, when you achieve something and it is a chief definite aim, there's this huge dopamine release on that achievement.
Yep.
But on the backside of a huge spike of dopamine, there's a huge valley. And without the ability to forward, like, look at the future and say, well, now I won't sign up for a race if I don't know the race following, because that after effect
totally
is so, it feels like you lived your whole life for something.
And now what? It's like when you binge a really good Netflix show and then you feel empty.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good.
No, but I think, you know what? I actually hadn't thought about that. And you're abundantly right. And I can give you concrete examples of some of these clients that I'm so immensely proud of these achievements. And I've seen two things happen. One of them, like, one option is that they never stop running, right? Forrest Gump style, to use the marathon metaphor.
Yeah.
The finish line was like over there and they just never stop running.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, sit down. And they're like, can't. And then the other that I've seen is this, like, full kind of like turn inward and come down from not only the lack of dopamine or the surge and then, the depletion of dopamine, but also the overstimulation that comes with these goals. And then finally not having that noise is both necessary and incredible, but also somewhat overwhelming, you know? And so I've kind of seen both of those scenarios happen. And now that you put it so obviously, which, like, in a good way, I've witnessed both.
Yeah. Changing or adjusting topics a little bit. How do you, being a lawyer, look at AI and its integration into the legal space. Do you see that as an opportunity, or do you see that as a threat?
I think seeing it as a threat is silly.
Yeah.
Or I think seeing it as a threat is showing somebody's insecurities. With that said,
Winners win.
Right, and I'm speaking very broadly. In the legal field specifically, it's absolutely atrocious. So I'm actually zero, like, in that.
Okay.
For now. Do I think it'll get a lot better? For sure. Do I think that it's a great resource for some like simple answer to questions? Yes. The reason that for the legal field specifically, it is so bad right now is because if you're a good lawyer, you understand your clients' hows and whens. And, we talked about psychology and deal making and their pressure points. And so even if a contract is perfect, it may not be perfect for them. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that, there's like old running jokes forever about lawyers. And whenever you ask a lawyer a question, it's always like, maybe, right? They'll never give you a yes or a no. They'll be like, well, it depends.
Yeah.
Right. And so the it depends is definitely something that AI can tackle, but it's so many if X, then Y, if Y, then Z, if Z, then maybe, if B, then like, are you a guy? Like, and so I think in that respect, the few things that we've tried to integrate have fallen so short. What I will say is that the bad thing that I've seen is that a lot of people try to save money by drafting AI contracts. And,
You're one of them.
Yeah, no, I get it.
In the sky. That's why we're working with you now.
I get it. My dad always says being cheap is expensive.
Yeah.
And I always rather somebody not have a contract than have a bad contract. The reason being that you're now bound by things that you don't fully understand their consequence. I'd rather you just not be bound by anything and let's just go with the law.
Yeah.
Right? Like statutes or case law or whatever the case is. I'd rather that than you having inadvertently agreed to something that you don't know the ultimate, consequences of.
Yeah.
And so that's one side. And the other side is that sometimes they're just drafted in basically gibberish.
Yeah.
And it literally takes 4 seconds of me like opening the document. I'm like, nope. This is an AI contract, which is, we'll fix it. We'll help you. We'll do the things like, again, but yeah, I've seen some interesting things come through because again, it's still in the process. But
It's still massive.
Where do you see like the future of it going within the law? Like, how can you leverage it to be an asset?
Yeah, I think things that are repetitious in the law, I think it's going to be great for. I think simplifying complex questions, but I still think you're going to need the interpretation. Because again, I think, and I'll simplify this for you right now in a today's setting, right? Because AI is today's new, phone is today's new internet, is today's new whatever, right? Yeah. So oftentimes, like we file companies or we file trademarks and they're forms. And clients are like, well, I could fill the form. I'm like, for sure, you're not paying me to fill out this form. You're paying me to tell you all the what ifs, all the right ways to do something, because if you do it this way, then that, all this. So do I think that there are scenarios where like there will be things to help us be more efficient and be more succinct and 100%. In the same way that the internet made us communicate better, right? Good and bad. But I still think that the intricacies of psychology and personality and the nuances of the intangible, the je ne sais quoi, the magic.
Yeah.
For now, that's on us.
Yeah.
Because there's this the idea of being in legal and then having being in something legal and then having to trust something that is not a human seems so like against the grain of our.
Yeah, that's because we're still really early in it. I think in the beginning, people also would see something on TV and not trust it.
Yeah.
Or now see
Fair.
something on the internet and I wish didn't trust it. But I think ultimately we are kind of like the same way, like, I don't know, our great grandparents or whatever, like they got the first telephone and they're like, what is this? And like, what do we do with it? And are we terrified of it? Or is it good? Right. Or the first cell phones that came out, it's like, whatever. So I don't know. I'm somebody that I'm not super in it. I'm sufficiently aware. 1 year in, 1 year out. And because this is still, I still got to be in it.
Yeah.
But, I'm looking around and I'm paying attention. And I think that that's right now a healthy place.
Interesting. Now, the question that I was going to ask when it comes to, broadly speaking, for both people, but more so in creatives, you're on the front lines of deal making, which I get really, really excited about. I think some of the most creative environments are deal making because there are 100 different angles that you can take and how you set it up. In the creative space specifically, what are some deals that you're seeing on the day-to-day that you're seeing kind of affect how the culture is moving, how creative, like that industry is shifting?
Love this question and love that you are bringing up the idea of creativity and deal making, because it's something that I think I'm really proud of. And I think that it's something that a lot of lawyers don't champion enough, right?
It's one of the highest leverage skill sets in the marketplace because you can do one deal for $1,000 or literally $1 billion, and it's the same energy.
Totally. And I think that this idea of understanding value and how there's value is such a different, can be in so many different forms for so many different people, creates a whole new playing field when you're negotiating a contract. So I love that you said that contracts are creative things, because to me they are, right? And it's like me being hella nerd, but like the nerdy side of me gets super excited because that's how I get creative, right? When I'm like looking at a contract, I'm like, what if we did this instead, right? Or what if we asked for this? Like, oh, their budget's maxed out. What if we did this instead or whatever? And so love that. Some interesting, good trends that I'm seeing that I love is slowly big corporations are really acknowledging that they need and are respecting the creatives in a way that they didn't used to. So whereas I think that giant companies used to be like, we got it. You just stand in front of the camera and look nice, right? Or like, let's just use your name, but like, we'll let you know where to show up and what time. And I think now they're coming to the talent, to the creators, to the, and saying, hey, like, what ideas do you have? Right? And not always, right? Sometimes a lot of my creatives have to like force themselves in the doors. But I've had a lot of clients prove that when they do let them in the door, the outcome is tenfold.
Yeah.
And the magic that they can create is something that corporations can't, because their ear is not to the ground, because they are not in the streets, because they don't understand their audience in the way that the actual creatives can get to interact with on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that the companies that are championing the creatives are winning. And I think the companies that continue to do that will continue to win.
I think what creativity is bringing to corporations that wasn't prerequisite, but now is personality. Because I think innately, like I was talking about this the other day, it used to be that we had like 5 channels, ABC, NBC, Fox, whatever. And inside those channels, you had a program. So you had like 12, 13, 14 shows that filled the 24 hours in a day or whatever it was. We now live in the same world, but a much deeper universe beneath these channels, Instagram, YouTube, streaming services, what have you. What at least I'm seeing is either you are creating a universe or you're getting wrapped up into one. So either you're getting acquired by private equity or you are becoming private equity. So that aspect of creativity is I just see this ability for creatives to step in, and when they're not bound by the same the constraints of a corporation, you're able to think so abstractly.
Totally. And listen, it's a delicate balance because some of these mega corporations are built on structure and they need it. And we also can't fully do away with structure because that also doesn't work. It's full chaos. And so this idea of integration between structure and creativity is, I think, right now the uncomfortable moment that a lot of these companies are in. And the ones that can get through that moment of discomfort and marry those two things are going to continue to do amazing. And the ones that want to continue to be really rigid are not. And the ones that go all the way creative are probably also not.
Yeah.
Because you need both, right? And I always say that I don't know if the left side or the right side of the creative, right? So I'm the left side to the right side of the creatives, of the brain.
I know what you mean.
And so in the same way that every good team needs a balance of structure and creativity, same with a company or a campaign or a channel or a universe or whatever. And so I think that right now it's this uncomfortable moment of really integrating those two things in a new way. And you know, I see it happening in some and a lot of pushback in others. And
like a great example of this, and we to have this conversation at length, specifically when it comes to media. One of the most successful, trusted, large media networks in the world is run by 3 people, and it's the Joe Rogan Experience. You can just look at that broadly, but we listened to a podcast of Joe talking to the founder of Vice, which is another media organization, and they were kind of comparing and contrasting strategies. Vice became very corporate very quickly because they got private equity and they got VC, which are those organizational structures that come in and they say, you're going to operate under organization.
Rules, right?
Exactly. Versus this other side that is, it's been 3 people for 12, 15 years, and they have the result, quote unquote, but we were balancing it with where life is going. It has to marry, because Joe, to the extent that I understand, it will live and die with him.
right.
And that's,
And even if it doesn't, it's an anomaly, right? It's not, he's somebody who was a very special person. And so, which is incredible. But it's hard then to replicate or to build if you don't have that key element, right? And so, which I think is the truth for most creatives struggle with that. Most creatives, the mission lives and dies with them. And it doesn't have to die with them, but it's never as powerful as the center of it, right? And so, you know, they often struggle with like, I can only do so many things and I can only be so many places and I can only do so, right? And so this idea of being able to build something creative with people underneath you is so difficult, because getting people to intimately understand your vision the way that you do, that's very, very hard.
it's actually interesting that you say that, because how I've dealt with that exact challenge is just, for better or for worse, I just hire friends that I've known for 5 to 10 years, because what I'm able to then, whether they like it or not, they've heard me yabber for way too long. But what comes from that is this unique understanding of why. And so what I've been blessed to now see come to fruition is, like, over time, you communicate the vision so passionately that then that's where the culture starts to set in. And that's where autonomy starts to live, with the understanding of the chief definite aim and these different aspects of what we're trying to build. So it's interesting that you put that. But for creative businesses specifically, I always wonder, how do you take, like, let's just talk about media. How do you take a Fox and how do you take what Joe has and how do you merge that into a brand name that can live for a century, but still have the impact and the trust and the actual result of something like that?
I think the first word that comes to mind is mutual respect, right? There needs to come to a place where the creatives respect and acknowledge the need for structure, and the structure respecting and acknowledge how much they need the creatives. I've seen some companies starting to do it, and it's also always a huge learning curve. Not for the people in that middle section of corporations, but for the very, very top, right? The boardroom. The boardroom is really uncomfortable to make big changes for something that's always worked. And so it's easy to get the people on the ground floor to pay attention. You go to the 5th floor and they're listening, or at least, like, once you show them a thing or two, they're like, okay, we're on board. Then you get to the 10th floor. And once you get to the penthouse, they're like, whoa, like, slow down, buddy. This is crazy. And to get to the point where the people in the penthouse and the boardroom aren't looking at you like you're crazy, the amount of times you have to prove it to them is exhausting, and it's frustrating. And that's what I've witnessed a lot of my clients have to go through right now, of having to time and time again prove that their creativity is just as valuable to them as their structure is. And they've had to witness it and see it enough times to where, unfortunately, you have to make it undeniable, because you're teaching somebody a new value that they didn't value before.
Yeah, it's like actually creating, like, with a creative based company, creating a valuation. Like, that's one of my biggest kind of problems that I'm looking at, because when you try to hire, we've come over a ton of business mentors that are like, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to sell, you need to mass market your product, you need to productize what you do way more simply, like, so that way you can scale it.
Sure.
That's what structure would tell you in terms of how to grow that business. That's not allowing the creative aspects of building this business in a landscape that is completely unknown, that there are no historicals for, that there is no actual concrete understanding. So being able to, again, pitch that idea and then have facts behind it. This is the first time with podcasting specifically, I've had to teach people what podcasting is and why social media is important for the last 3 years. And it was an uphill battle pretty much the entire time. Thankfully, I just saw Neil Patel put out something where the demand for podcast has surpassed the demand for blogs on search.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Now, when you think of the supply, there's 1 billion blogs in the world. There's only 4 million podcasts. So there's a clear supply and demand problem.
Love that.
There's so being able to communicate that's the first time we've been able to do that.
Yeah.
Where you're actually clear.
There's quantifiable data that you can point to that they understand.
And I mean, when you look at like just even the past election and the importance of podcasting in that, completely not politically affiliated, but just the importance of podcasting, it's undeniable now. Yeah. But convincing a bunch of, boardrooms, suits, that was going to be derogatory, but like communicating that is really, really hard without that back data.
Yes, but it's also an advantage. And I say that because, and I say this to young attorneys often, but when I first started out, I was a very young attorney in an industry, business and IP is typically older, very experienced. And it's like, well, I want the most experienced lawyer to do my deal. And so I was at a disadvantage. I say that in quotes. And so what did I do? I was like, well, I understand why social media matters. And they don't. And so all of a sudden, this became a huge advantage. And, one of my clients and good friends, Greg, when he first hired me, he was like, I had a Rockefeller lawyer for a long time. And he's like, and I met you and you get it. And so I want you to be my lawyer. And he was the first person to say that to me and like lit, a light bulb, because I'm like, that's my advantage. I get it and they don't. And so I can capitalize on it while other people are still trying to get it. So that is both your disadvantage, but also your advantage.
Well, that's just the epiphany that I just had. I think we just answered the question by taking that's why your role I look at your position as the mediator between the structure and the creative, like action. Yeah. And that bridge is what creates that kind of symbiotic relationship that without somebody, literally the exact experience that you're talking about is why I was so getting on the phone with these guys. Like, this is a no-brainer. Like, we have to do this because she gets it in a world where, first of all, it changes every single day. Yeah. So actually getting it, you have to have your finger on the pulse daily. Yeah. But then, just that, like, I'm not crazy. I'm not psycho. Like, you're
not crazy at all. And I appreciate you saying that, because I think that, we were talking about this amoeba or transition that I'm going on, that I'm currently in. And I think it's this idea of redefining what a lawyer really is. And that's something that, like, I feel really great about, and that I'm not a super conventional lawyer. Yeah. I am a lawyer at my core, and that is what I do wholeheartedly. I'm not trying to be an influencer. I'm not trying to be anything but a lawyer. But I think redefining what a lawyer is, right? And being more than just somebody that drafts the contracts, but rather being that liaison, being that advisor, being that medium between getting it, but then also being able to translate it and finding that, that solution. Because ultimately we are problem solvers, and we are meant to be problem solvers. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I think that that's kind of the place that I'm in right now, is redefining, at least for me and for my team, what it really means to be a lawyer today, and what kind of lawyer we want, lawyers we want to be.
And I think, like you were saying before, that like the number one thing that you see in high performers is effective communication. So it's like you can just turn the tables on anything. Yeah. Right. So it's like you just shift. If you're able to shift the perspective, that's the high performer. Like, you're just clearing the problems out of the way. And
we have a medium now with social media and with podcasting and with these things, to where a hand-to-hand combat conversation that, you'd have to have 1,000 times can be done once. And like, that is taking what always seemed to be unscalable and actually providing the scale that we now have. The question I'd have for you, by the way, how are you on time? You
I
good?
have no idea what time or day.
12:30.
It's 12:30. We're
okay.
definitely
Yes.
running over. But
Yes.
I guess my question when it comes down to creative control, because you have corporations that, and I have an assumption, and this is a biased assumption because I am the creative and I'm not the suit in this case. But I think their lack of understanding the nimble nature of what we're doing comes down to their lack of trust in like the humans that like when you build systems and when you live by systems, the reason you build systems so airtight is because of human error. So when you're constantly optimizing for human error, the idea of having a human come into your office and saying, I want to take, you're going to acquire us.
Yep.
I don't want you to tell me a single word about creative control. Like
Yep.
I want you to stay out of that completely when they're the one either putting the capital into you, whatever the situation is. Very, very
times.
tricky business. How do you be the bridge between both?
Yeah.
of them?
And I think that that's where I'm going to go full lawyer. Paperwork matters, right? And a lot of times what we're drafting is founder controls, founder and or creatives or whatever. And we're making sure that your baby, not to use like an old school term, but like your baby remains your baby and your vision remains your vision. And that there's flexibility in certain decisions that affect the business or, because these are your financial partners to an extent or your corporate partners or whatever, but then autonomy in the things that made you who you are. And I think that there has to be a level of trust and respect before this conversation can really be had in a meaningful way. But once there is that trust and respect, then putting actual papered safeguards in place for founders and for creatives is something that we've become really good at. And listen, the law is creative in that I've had situations where we've literally gone down a list of like every foreseeable task or problem set or situation, and like, who gets to make the decision here, right? If it's a business decision, if it's a tax decision, if it's a creative decision, if it's a decision that integrates both of these things, what kind of, some things you may own more of the company than me, but I may be the founder or I may be the creative, and we're deciding what color jacket you're going to wear today. And I'm going to, you're going to stay out of it. And so I think that transparency is fundamental and trust and respect. And I think that it's really hard to be transparent and stand on your vision when you're asking someone, hey, fund me, but also don't tell me what to do. It's tough, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you can get to a place where they truly respect and admire and, believe in what you're doing
And get it.
and they got to get it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's part of your mission when you're fundraising. It's not just, will you give me money? It's, will you trust me enough because you get it?
Yeah, it's interesting because the last piece that I'll say on that, when you're dealing with a lot of these people, they live by the code of law where, what you're optimizing for is shareholder return. And when you operate in that, things are black and white.
Yep.
Like things are clearly black and white. Whether you said something that made the shareholders more money or lost them money is going to be the direct representation between, but you can't say, well, I'm going to sit. First of all, I don't know what I'm going to say because that's what authenticity is in a simple sense. But I can promise you, if there's this micro dip, the ability to be completely authentic and to have human error in the way that I even communicate or something is actually what makes this whole thing work. Because in order to be trusted, you have to be okay with being wrong.
Yep. And in order to be trusted, and now I'm speaking about your audience, there needs to be a human element of error. If everything you always say and do and communicate is so perfect, people can't relate.
Yeah.
And so especially when you're in this type of space, relatability and storytelling and connecting with an audience and all those things is important. And that same skill that you're able to do with your audience is how you need to find a way to do it with the board members of getting them to find value in that human error and find belief and trustworthiness and connect with you in some way, right? And yes, it's about the bottom line. And yes, it's, about these days we can quantify so many different things, whether it's impressions and views or dollars and how that converts and all those things. And so that's, again, a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because you can also say, hey, listen, I know that your dollar bottom line isn't there yet, but look at these impressions, look at this growth. There's something there's motion. Stick with me.
There's
you know?
momentum.
Yes. And so, yeah, I think that when it comes to having this mission, it's not just your audience that you need to get on board. It's not just the boardroom you have to get on board. It's all these different players. And you too have this task of being able to speak to all these different audiences in a way that connects with them to get to your greater goal. And I think that the best entrepreneurs are the ones that can, I hate the word like shapeshift or chameleon or whatever, but be adaptive. And being adaptive
Adapt
means,
or die.
Yeah, it means being respectful of the boardroom and understanding their values so that they can understand yours.
Yeah, I think after the conversation, your understanding of like not only the industry but people and just culture, and you're just a winner. I'm just super grateful to have you on our team and not against us.
Yeah, exactly.
Agree. I'm super hype about being on your guys' team. I also we talked about on the call, I love what you guys are doing. I also, it sounds very elementary, but I get it.
Yeah.
And there's such a need for it.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that you guys are flexible and that you're offering these different services in these different ways, the fact that you are providing value in this way, but then also through the business, that there's just so many layers to this. And I love that you both have this very visible and tangible kind of excitement about it. And I think that that's huge. So I'm super excited, and shout out to Sammy for connecting us.
I'm excited to get off the AI contracts and actually get some help around here.
Big for us.
The last thing that I want to kind of, based on the whole conversation, I have an assumption. I want to test it.
Okay.
I have this assumption when you look at Barstool and when you look at these are all founder led. If you want to look at it, Barstool in a way is kind of private equity for the creator economy in a certain idea.
Yeah.
In this, where I see this whole thing going in my mind is if you're right now we manage brands. We had this conversation yesterday. The idea of managing a personal brand and a podcast, which is a business in and of itself, there is a private equity structure or skill set that is kind of just beat into you over time. I see over the next 20, 30 years, you're going to get this creator economy rush where you do have a life cycle of being a creator in my mind, like a true creator, like an influencer, you're up and then eventually people stop caring unless you're like Joe Rogan, but that's the outlier. That's not the baseline. But this new generation of guys like us and these people that are like Barstool and stuff being able to create and then position themselves appropriate with Penn National Gaming, with these big conglomerates, and then also kind of just buck the system and, Dave doing what he did, buying Barstool back for $1. You know what I mean? Like you're setting these people up to, in part, be the suits in the next 20 years. And I think that could be really interesting.
I absolutely agree. I think that obviously creators are gaining more value, right? And they're now becoming the CEOs and they're now becoming the visionaries that are actually having the say-so. And so that changes everything. But I'm curious to see, and again, this is all living as we're living as it's happening. I'd be curious to see as these creatives become the suits that they don't start turning into the structure.
Yeah.
Because structure is a necessary evil to certain extents. And so there are certain structures that become necessary to come into play. And so I'm curious to see how that continues to pan out as these, free spirits and
make a heel turn.
Or not.
In the creative world,
or
a heel
not,
turn.
right? So, but I'm curious to see it because, again, I think that there's a sweet spot.
Yeah.
There's a sweet spot between structure and creativity. And if you can have both, and listen, one of my favorite attributes that one of my clients has, and I tell them this all the time because everybody sees him as this unbelievable creative. And I'm like, I know a lot of creative people. How many people do you know that sing beautifully?
Yeah.
Right? For example, but they're not successful, artists. This person is a very, very beautiful marry of creativity and business savvy. Yeah. And he is somebody that understands business really, really well, but is innately impossibly creative. And so his vision is all about his creativity and whatever, but he has a business mind, or at least more than others in that industry. And that to me is a recipe for absolute success.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That feels really good because I feel like we're doing
there.
our best to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can people support you? How can people find you?
By the way,
Yes.
just off topic, you are born to do this.
Yeah.
Specifically. Like I'm not just trying to say that. Like this was like we have conversations all the time, and the funny thing that you'll find is there's a certain depth to people. And once you start hitting, a conversation like this, like you'll run into the bottom really, really quickly in some people. And I think innately that is the competitive advantage. I can say you have a genuine competitive advantage in this field.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm going to come here all the time. You guys are so nice. I appreciate you guys. Honestly, this was so fun. I also love doing this. I love hearing like different points of view on this. And also the fact that you guys are now clients and that I get to really participate in it is also just so exciting for us. And, Sam always knows, like, I really, like, am in it with my clients. Like, our culture within the firm is this idea that, like, we put on our clients' jerseys because we integrally want to be a part of your team. So this has been amazing. How can people support me? I'll give you email, Instagram, all of it. Email is brenda@dsmiami.com. Instagram for the firm is ds_Miami, I believe. And personal Instagram is @BSCHAMS, Bshams. So yeah, follow, like, subscribe. Do people still say that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
She is worldwide.
Yes.
We are worldwide. But we're just excited to connect with people. You know what I mean? And it doesn't need to be such like an obvious, like tangible, like contact me to be your lawyer. Contact me if you were inspired by something we said. Contact me if you want to chat. Contact if maybe we can be your lawyers. Maybe you just want insight from a different point of view, whatever, right? And we just really love connecting with people. And I think that that's what we've built our business on, is just like having a genuine interest in that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Thank you guys so much for having me.